are these people?
Assange's extradition. So this was what, yesterday, 2 days ago? Something like that?
Yesterday.
Yeah, like at like 6 a.m. here on the East Coast, because UK time awful. So I brought this from Gosztola, who did excellent work on this. So Assange's extradition delayed. UK High Court asks US to offer assurances or face limited appeal. While granting WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange a limited appeal against extradition, the US government was encouraged by the UK High Court to submit assurances that could prevent further proceedings. We've already had assurances from them before, so we're going to get into why that's bullshit, but I wanted to remind people that it's laughable who the judges are presiding over the Assange case. If the national media reported it, the case would collapse. Look, Tory appointee and previously acted for MI6. So if you're wondering why decisions go this way, it's because they're meant to go that way. So, yeah. The British High Court of Justice partially granted WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange's request to appeal and delayed his extradition to the United States. However, the U.S. government was given an opportunity to provide assurances that may result in his extradition in the next months. Assange was granted permission to appeal on the grounds that extradition may violate his right to freedom of expression. The court accepted that he may face prejudice due to the fact that he is a non-U.S. citizen and that the prosecution may expose him to the death penalty, which is barred under extradition law. But the court refused to allow Assange to appeal on the grounds that the U.S. is prosecuting him for political opinions, that extradition would violate his right to a fair trial, and that the extradition would violate his right to life or expose him to cruel and inhuman treatment. So they're not basing the appeal off those grounds, because in the UK you can't extradite for political cases,
right?
Essentially. So, which I don't know how this isn't one, but you know, the court rejected Assange's request to include fresh evidence related to alleged evidence that CIA Director Mike Pompeo and other CIA officials sketched out plans to kidnap or kill Assange while he was living under diplomatic asylum in Ecuador's London embassy. So remember this. We're going to talk about this in a second. Okay, this is big deal. U.S. officials were encouraged by the court to offer assurances that Assange would be protected by the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, that he would not be prejudiced at trial as a result of his nationality, and that the death penalty will not be imposed. This is the one I didn't get, that because he's Australian, somehow our judicial system would like be prejudiced towards that. I'm not sure how that got in here. A little weird. Like, I don't know if that was brought up by Julian's lawyers, and so therefore they're gonna listen to that, but I don't know. So Stella Assange condemned the High Court for inviting a political intervention from the United States to send a letter saying it's all okay. I found this astounding. The Biden administration should not issue assurances. They should drop this shameful case that should never have been brought. Julian should have never been imprisoned for a single day. She further declared, if the U.S. government submits such assurances, which they are likely to do, prosecutors in the U.S. Justice Department may avert a limited appeal. They have until April 16th to offer assurances. A hearing will be held on May 20th if the U.S. government submits assurances to the court. Okay? So, Gabriel Shipton, Julian lives to fight another day. A very strange decision by the courts asking for more political assurances. Another acknowledgement of the political nature of the case. Free Julian Assange. So, that's kind of where we start, right? And just as a recap, Victoria Sharp and Jeremy Johnson, the British High Court, agreed with the following points in the Assange appeal. A, if extradited, the applicant might be prejudiced at his trial by reason of his nationality, right? That's the weird one that I don't understand. B, as a consequence of A, but only as a consequence of A, extradition is incompatible with Article 10 of the Convention. if the European Convention on Human Rights, Article 10, protects the right to freedom of expression. The applicant has established an arguable case that the Secretary of State's decision was wrong because extradition is barred by inadequate specialty death penalty protection. Right? So essentially, all they had to do is say that they're not going to give him the death penalty. So in the assurances, which I think they've already done before. Right? So this is what got dismissed, which I don't understand why these got. So the UK-US extradition treaty prohibits extradition for a political offense, and the offenses with which the applicant is charged fall within that category. So they dismissed this, right? So the extradition request was made for the purpose of prosecuting the applicant on account of his political opinions. Again, dismiss that. Extradition is incompatible with Article 7 of the European Convention on Human Rights. Right, so they dismiss that as well. Extradition is incompatible with Article 6 of the Convention, which is a right to a fair trial. Again, they dismiss that. Extradition is incompatible with Articles 2 and 3 of the Convention, right to life and prohibition of inhumane and degrading treatment. They dismiss that as well. So I don't know how that's possible. But because to me this case falls under all of those. But, you know, what do I know? I don't get to go put on a powdered wig and be at the royal courts. So, you know, like, but anyway, Richie's going to explain the weird stuff in this. So, you know, listen up, pay attention.
So the court decided that Julian Assange exposing US government crimes and then being threatened with 175 years by the US government are unrelated events. And the worst part is that they accept the US government is criminal. They acknowledge the torture, the rendition, the meddling with legal cases in Europe. Talk about irony. And then how do they substantiate this? Well, they say the federal prosecutor is a nice man. He swore to us. He's a nice man. That is what they wrote in the judgment. And then the best part, at the end, they blame Assange. They say, well, you know, Assange does not accuse Mr. Kronberg of dishonesty. That in itself is fatal to this aspect of the applicant's face. Oh, okay, I see. So it's because he didn't do that. Well, you know, I agree with the judges. I agree. Maybe Assange should have said this directly to the court. They are dishonest. That's all they are. And then they say that the fact the CIA headquarters are only 15 miles from the courthouse will totally have no effect on the selection of jurors who will, you know, convict or not convict Assange. They say, it's not impossible to find 12 independent jurors. Yes, I'm sure it's not impossible. The question is not whether it's impossible. The point is that it's very likely there's a conflict of bloody interest, isn't there? The people trained to lie for a living, you expect them to tell the truth when they're selected for jury duty regarding someone who exposed their crimes? I mean, didn't Mike Pompeo, you know, the CIA director who helped launch this case, say, what's his motto? We lied, we cheated, we stole. Here's another great bit. The judges say that, this whole plot to kidnap Assange and poison him or assassinate him, it doesn't matter anymore because if we extradite him, well, then there's no need to do any of that, right? Yes, that's the point. That's what the whole case is about. It's getting him to the United States to kill him. Thank you for admitting that. Yes. High Court have really screwed Assange because what they've done now is they've looked at the case, they've thrown out all the important points, everything that matters, you know, that this is a violation of press freedoms, the fact that Assange and his lawyers were spied on, all of the meat. And now they're doing exactly what the lower court did in 2021. They're giving Assange a hollowed out, bittersweet victory and then setting him up to fail in the next stage so that the United States can extradite him. In 2021, they said, okay, we'll block the extradition, but only on health grounds. And now it's again, we'll block the extradition, but only until the United States can give us better assurances. What do you mean better assurances? Even if the United States gave Assange an ironclad contract, you should never believe them. I published classified documents from the US government of a man who was extradited from Spain to the US on condition he serve a sentence back in Spain so he could be close to his family. Simple case, no political background. He hadn't published any documents, just a stupid marijuana case, right? The United States literally signed a contract and then violated it the second that he arrived there. They literally photoshopped his signature out. They photoshopped his signature out so that he couldn't go to court and then contest their behavior. What do you think they're going to do to Julian Assange? You think they're going to be fair with him? You expect the Americans to treat him fairly? Man, I was sitting 2 meters away from the US lawyer when the judges asked, can you slap additional charges on Assange the second he sets foot in America? US goes, yeah. Can you give him the death penalty? Yeah. Dude, throw the whole case out. Right there, bam, done. For me, this is really infuriating because I have literal evidence. I worked on these assurances, and you can never, ever trust the Americans. Today, they'll say, yeah, we'll give Assange the rights that Americans get. And then the second he's in America, they'll say, hey, we said the rights that Americans get, not US citizens. Or, well, we said we wouldn't give him the death penalty. We didn't say we would Jeffrey Epstein him, you know, while all the cameras are off. These are people you cannot trust. This is who we're dealing with. Make no mistake. No matter what assurances they give, it will be a lie.
Any questions?
I mean, I don't understand it. As you said, like, it's just very, I mean, we expected this in a way, but just, I think the gymnastics to justify kicking the can down the road.
Yeah.
You know, with no, I mean, what does this mean for Assange? I mean, he's just still in jail.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just on one hand, I mean, I guess it's a good thing that, you know, he's not extradited now, but that's not to say he won't be later. So yeah, it's just very confusing to me as you said, why this is happening, but it makes sense, but I don't get the law. Like,
yeah,
the law,
well, the law doesn't make sense here.
Around it.
It feels like they're completely ignoring treaties they already have in place. You know, so like there is already extradition treaties that they are just ignoring because these particular parts of it they've just dismissed that would enact those things. And I don't know how you can just dismiss them. So
I do think, though, this has something to do with Biden obviously being an election.
Yeah, the election year. Yeah, clearly.
Like, he does. I think he's just basically like, I just want to kind of prolong this as long as I can. I don't want to necessarily think about this.
Yeah.
I don't want to bring any attention to it. So let's just kind of kick the can down the road and just kind of let this go as long as we can. So either, you know, assuming that he will not be president come January, then Trump will deal with it, or I guess it's just going to be more of the same bullshit.
Yeah, well, he was the one who started this, really.
Right, and that's not to say why not continue prolonging the act
right
as long as he can. Because Desmond Mantis even said in the chat, the U.S. will not give him the death penalty. It will just let him rot in solitary confinement.
Yeah, the process is the punishment, as they say.
I think this is essentially the punishment of him rotting in jail.
Yeah.
So, you know, killing him slowly in jail. So I think that would be the preferred option rather than bring attention to it, so that at least this way he can kind of, in their mind, go away quietly. Versus
Max Sarge in the chat, Jimmy Dore saying there's some linked papers Assange might be going home. I mean, would be nice.
Okay.
I'll have to look into that. But well, here's what I do have. So you heard Richie talk about that they're not gonna allow fresh evidence, right? So the fresh this is what's in the actual statement. The fresh evidence is similar to the evidence that was before the judge, including from witness 2, and expands upon that evidence in certain respects on the basis that it alleges the CIA planned to kidnap and or assassinate and or rendition the applicant, not merely to poison him. So did you get the wording there? Right? It expands upon the evidence of witness 2. Right? So they're talking about that this evidence was already, there's similar evidence that they already dismissed in the lower courts. Right? Mm-hmm. But that the expansion of this evidence is that it alleges the CIA planned to kidnap and or assassinate him, which they're not allowing that as fresh evidence. Okay? Plainly, these are allegations of the utmost seriousness. We are satisfied, however, that the Fantomas test is not met. The relevant question here is, would the judge have discharged the applicant on Article 2 and or 3 grounds if the fresh evidence had been before her? In our view, it is not arguable that she would have done so. So, first of all, have you heard of the Fantomas test? Because I haven't, and I tried to look it up, right? The things I found were this one tweet. Third, at the highest level, it affirmed the strict test for allowing an appeal based on fresh evidence as prescribed in 3 Hungarian judicial authorities v. Fantomas. So I asked around on Twitter for more info, right? And got this from Guy Fawkes saying it's a screening test used to identify individuals who might have dyslexia. It was developed by Dr. Charles Fantomas and assesses various aspects of reading and language skills, including phonological awareness, rapid naming, and other cognitive abilities related to reading. So I sent that paragraph I just had and be like, how is it relevant to this then? They continue, in short, the court evaluates if new evidence meets the Fantomas test for dyslexia, but concludes it doesn't. Focus shifts to whether the judge's decision would change based on fresh evidence regarding the applicant's discharge. And we heard what they said. They said that it wouldn't. Right? So let's continue. Comrade Misty, the fact that they aren't going to even consider the fact that the U.S. is plotting to assassinate him and are giving the U.S. an opportunity to present more assurances is a fucking joke. U.S. assurances aren't fit to wipe my ass with. This is just yet another attempt to kick the can down the road. I'm fuming. And she asks, what in the fresh fucking hell is this paragraph? This is regarding the dismissal of the assassination plots even being considered. And she asks us to read it carefully. So we're going to. So the judge did not reject the evidence that the applicant had adduced to similar effect as untrue, and the original allegations were, by some margin, serious enough to bar extradition if the alleged misconduct was in any way connected to the extradition proceedings. The judge's critical finding, however, is that there was nothing to show that the conduct in relation to the embassy was connected to the extradition proceedings. The new evidence does not change that on the face of the allegations, on the evidence before the judge, and the fresh evidence. The contemplation of extreme measures against the applicant, whether poisoning, for example, or rendition, were a response to the fear that the applicant might flee to Russia. The short answer to this is that the rationale for such conduct is removed if the applicant is extradited. Okay? Extradition would result in him being lawfully in the custody of the United States authorities, and the reason, if they can be called that, for rendition or kidnap or assassination, then fall away. So did you get the reasoning on all this? Did you pick that up?
Yeah, I still don't get it though.
Okay, what do you think that was saying for the people at home? Like, it's odd, their reasoning here. So, like, from what I can deduce and what others have deduced is that essentially this evidence can't be put in because it doesn't connect with the extradition proceedings, because if Julian was extradited, they wouldn't have to kidnap and assassinate him, and that stuff in the embassy isn't related. And the only reason that they wanted to do that was because he might flee to Russia and therefore couldn't be in the lawful custody of the U.S.
Which still makes no sense.
Which makes no sense, right? Because which I'll get to that in a second. But first, just to reiterate what I'm thinking, much smarter than people than me are thinking the similar things. Stefania Marizzi says one of the most incredible paragraphs of the High Court, the one we just read, says this: extradition would result in him being lawfully in custody of the U.S. authorities, and the reason for rendition or kidnapped or assassination then fall away, right? The High Court judgment does not say that the alleged CIA plans to kill Julian Assange are not relevant. It says that if a killer tries to kill you, then he gives up and just try to lure you into his flat, you should be comfortable to go there as he stops trying to kill you. That's... I mean... Yeah, so... I wanted to bring this up too, right? Remember they said it was because of what? He was trying to flee where?
Russia.
Right. So again, Stefania Marizzi in The Secret Power, WikiLeaks and Its Enemies, writes, Fidel Narvaez, then Ecuadorian consul to London, told me that Ecuador considered Russia to be one possible option, but the legal counsel of WikiLeaks founder did not. Garzon put it to me like this: we considered countries such as Greece, Serbia, Bolivia, Venezuela, and China, always ruling out Russia and making it clear to the Ecuadorian authorities that this country would not be viable because it would fuel conspiracy theories.
Right.
So they were definitely not going to Russia. They weren't going to flee there.
Right.
So how the fuck,
especially given the timing,
is
it
this
wouldn't have been in his best interest too.
No, but also that's what they're saying is the reasoning for them trying to kill him. And therefore, because that's not the case now, he was never going to flee to Russia. So, like...
Yeah, it's Russiagate.
Yes.
That's essentially what it is. It's like, which
but
makes no sense.
Unfounded.
Right. Because considering, like, Julian is smart enough to know that if he ended up wanting to, even just the idea of going there at that time would not have worked in his favor. So, you know, we know that he probably definitely knew that.
He definitely knew that.
But I think this is, again, just a way that they don't have anything else.
Yeah.
So now they have to try and make up stuff to justify, you know, like what's going on right now.
Yep.
So it's literally bomb out the barrel bullshit that is going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's none of the important stuff, all the bullshit that can be easily dismissed by the US. Like, it's just, let's wait another 3 months, and then we're going to do something to make him wait another 6 months, and then election's over.
Right.
You know, and then we'll have whoever bring him over. It'll be fine. We're just, you know, we're changing managers. So, you know, if you could just wait, please. But Assange has already been waiting nearly 5 years. That anniversary is coming up, I think, very soon. So extradition was approved by the UK government in June 2022, and the WikiLeaks founder has pursued an appeal for more than a year and a half. In that time, his mental and physical health has greatly deteriorated. This is a man who had a mini stroke. Despite global condemnation, and also couldn't make it to this trial because supposedly he had coughed so hard he broke a rib. How does that happen in prison, Collin? Isn't that weird?
Well, the only way that can happen is his physical health has really deteriorated that
far. I don't know if it's gone that far. You know, I think a knee by a fucking dude with a badge and a billy club probably is more likely, maybe. But what do I know? Despite global condemnation by civil liberties, human rights, journalists unions, press freedom organizations, and various political leaders, especially in Australia and Europe, U.S. prosecutors refused to drop charges against Assange. They were first pursued by officials in President Donald Trump's administration. Assange is charged with 17 counts of violating the Espionage Act and 1 count of conspiracy to commit a computer intrusion. The unprecedented charges stem from the fact that he engaged in journalism and published classified documents that were provided by U.S. Army whistleblower Chelsea Manning in 2010 and 2011. In 2021, the High Court ruled in favor of the U.S. government after they appealed a district judge decision that found extradition would be oppressive to Assange's mental health, given the widespread inhuman treatment that has been documented in U.S. jails and prisons. Right? So that came on an International Human Rights Day. The U.S. State Department salvaged the extradition case by intervening. They offered diplomatic assurances on how Assange would be treated in U.S. custody and reminded the U.K. government that the U.S. and U.K. have a long history of cooperation on extradition matters. That was enough to alleviate the High Court's concerns, even though there were loopholes in their promises. Extradition from the UK is barred if there is a risk that the requested person will be sentenced to death. During court proceedings in February 2021, Ben Watson KC, who was instructed to represent the UK Home Secretary, accepted that Assange could later be charged with aiding or abetting treason on a more severe charge of espionage that could lead to the death penalty. There are no arrangements in place to prevent the imposition of the death penalty, Watson conceded. Watson's responses led the High Court to believe that capital charges given calls by leading politicians and other public figures in the U.S. could result in a death sentence for Assange if he was convicted. And remember, during this trial, Richie just told you that they said that was exactly what could happen. Right? Mm-hmm. The U.S.'s representative. So, furthermore, the High Court accepted that Assange wished to argue at trial that if he was granted First Amendment rights, then the prosecution would be stopped. The First Amendment is therefore of central importance to his defense to the extradition charge, the High Court added. Further, if he is convicted, he may wish to invoke the First Amendment on the question of sentence. If he is not permitted to rely on the First Amendment because of his status as a foreign national, he will there be prejudiced, potentially very greatly prejudiced by reason of his nationality. So that's where that confusion comes from, right? So they're saying he might not be protected under the First Amendment because he's Australian and not a U.S. citizen. Okay? If the assistant U.S. attorney Gordon Kromberg, a lead prosecutor on the case who suggested the U.S. government might argue during trial that Assange was not protected by the First Amendment. Okay? Kromberg made a formal sworn declaration on behalf of the respondent and in support of the extradition request. The High Court asserted he put himself forward as able to provide authoritative assistance as to the application of the First Amendment. It can fairly be assumed that he would not have said that the prosecution could argue that foreign nationals are not entitled to protections under the First Amendment, unless that was a tenable argument that the prosecution was entitled to deploy with a real prospect of success. If such an argument were to succeed, it would, at least arguably, cause the applicant prejudice on the grounds of his non-U.S. citizenship, and hence on the grounds of his nationality. So that's, just to clarify all that, that's where that's coming from.
Okay.
Only narrowly did the High Court accept an appeal on the ground that his right to freedom of expression may be violated if he was not permitted to rely on the First Amendment, right? So, Glenn Greenwald writes, In the meantime, Assange remains in Belmarsh, the high-security UK prison where he's been held for 5 years. Every press freedom and civil liberty groups in the West has urged Biden's DOJ to drop the prosecution as a grave threat to press freedom. The goal is not to bring Assange to the U.S. Biden, White House, doesn't want the sideshow of a trial, daily protest, discovery into CIA, Assange on the stand. Biden is the first ever president to imprison a publisher. They want to kill Assange through conviction-free imprisonment.
Yeah, which is basically what I said and other people in the chat. Like, Biden. The thing is, I feel like the issue of Assange, to me, and this is just me, is not as prevalent as Palestine is right now. That being said,
it can
the
be.
idea of having it could be, with enough people knowing about it, sure. But, Biden already has the issue of him being protested against whenever he opens his mouth publicly. So to add Assange to that is, and especially if, and it only will take a few to kind of call out Assange in light of a protest, then people are going to, like the regular people who may not necessarily know about us, will start asking questions. And then, and as more people know about him, and especially through social media, I would imagine it will catch wildfire in the same way that Palestine has over the last few months. So so the government and the powers that be definitely do not want that addition to things. So I think this is their way to kind of end this quietly, not end it, but kind of not make noise about it, but just kind of prolong it with the hope that, if he just happens to
because if extradition happens before election season, plenty of people could use it.
Right. The issue is, though, and this is why I'm wondering, like, let's say if Biden does win a second term, what's going to happen then? Because I don't think even within this administration they can hold this for so long before more people start rattling the cage, so to speak. And I think either way, even if Trump would become president, I'm sure the cage will be, I would argue, probably more so. But I can imagine this is like, I feel in a way this is almost kind of Biden implicitly saying, I'm not going to be president in a sense, because I feel like he's almost counting that he will not be, so he doesn't have to deal with it and allow Trump to. That's kind of the implication this gives to me. Otherwise, I feel like this administration will do something to kind of deal with it in some fashion, but they haven't. So, and I think mostly out of fear, which makes sense. But it gives the impression to me that Biden knows that or in his thinking, he knows he's not going to get a second term. So he's just kind of like, I'll just kind of prolong it, as you said, to the fall. And then whatever happens. God forbid if Trump gets it. And and let him deal with it. And let him deal with the bullshit that comes along.
Which we already know how he feels,
Right.
I mean, he said publicly that they should just murder that guy. So, but, Gosztola continues, the court sided with Kronberg, who claimed the publication charges against Assange are explicitly limited to documents that contain the names of human intelligence sources. Right? So that's what they're saying this thing is supposed to be about, but there's nothing that says they can't change that. So, indeed, a deliberate decision was made not to charge the applicant in respect of the publication of any other material by him, the High Court stated. The applicant's publication of material which he alleges exposed the respondent's involvement in serious criminality may well raise strong public interest factors justifying a high level of protection, but the respondent does not seek to prosecute the applicant in respect of those matters, says that person. Effectively, the High Court ignored the general allegations in the indictment that do criminalize Assange for publishing all the material that he obtained. He is charged for encouraging sources to circumvent legal safeguards on information, provide that protected information to WikiLeaks for public dissemination, and continue the pattern of illegally procuring and providing protected information to WikiLeaks for distribution to the public. All the charges stem from standard news gathering activities that Assange engaged in as WikiLeaks editor-in-chief. Those activities were undertaken for the purpose of publishing documents on U.S. wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and diplomatic cables that exposed torture, human rights abuses, and various other examples of misconduct on the part of U.S. officials. The High Court decision made it clear that if the State Department offers another set of assurances that the U.S. government will likely be permitted to move forward with extraditing Assange, that would lead Assange's legal team to file a petition in the European Court of Human Rights in a last-ditch effort to save him from being flown to U.S. detention center for trial. Outside of the High Court, Stella Assange reminded the press and Assange supporters that her husband is a political prisoner, he's a journalist, and he's being persecuted because he exposed the true cost of war and human lives. This case is retribution. It is a signal to all of you that if you expose the interests that are driving war, they will come after you, they will put you in prison, and they will try to kill you. And you know what else they'll do? They'll lie about your fucking results. So look, ABC News, right? Oh, wrong button. There we go. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has been handed a legal lifeline by the High Court in London, where he was trying to appeal his extradition to the United States. But wait, Colin, there's more. This is from The Guardian, right? Julian Assange wins temporary reprieve in case against extradition to the U.S. Would you call what was handed him a legal lifeline or a temporary reprieve? Like,
No.
Yeah. So I think the narrative managers are trying to help Biden out, right? Throw these out here, say, look, no, we're actually trying to help. Jonathan K. Cook, no, Guardian, Julian Assange didn't win any kind of reprieve today, and to suggest otherwise is perverse. 5 years on, he is still caged in a high-security prison, convicted of nothing. The UK judiciary is still rubber-stamping his show trial. British judges are still turning a blind eye to his sustained psychological torture. As former UN expert Nils Melzer has documented, the UK courts are still ignoring the fact that Britain's extradition treaty with the US specifically bars extradition on political grounds. The goal was always about disappearing Assange from public view, keeping him locked away while he was vilified and his platform for public evidence of state war crimes destroyed. There has been no reprieve from any of that today. A full legal process has simply reached another state in its endless justification for his never-ending incarceration for the crime of journalism. So I brought Stella's speech because it's short and important. We heard bits of it in the article, but I figured I'd let her speak for herself. So I'll let her do
Julian
that.
is just a few days away from the 5th anniversary of his arrest and imprisonment in Belmarsh prison. He has been in Belmarsh for 5 years without conviction, and the charges against him are to punish him for publishing the truth, for publishing evidence of the war crimes committed by the country that is trying to extradite him. Now, the UK courts have invited the United States to issue assurances. The Biden administration should not issue assurances. They should drop this shameful case that should never have been brought. Julian should never have been imprisoned for a single day. This is a shame on every democracy. Julian is a political prisoner. He is a publisher, and he is being published for expressing his political opinion, for expressing freedom of the press in its purest form. Free Julian. I ask everyone to rally behind him and call for his freedom, call for the Biden administration to drop the case and support House Resolution 934 before the U.S. Congress to drop this case. Thank you.
Any questions on what we should be doing?
I mean, make noise about it, honestly.
Yep. Call your reps, have them sign on to that shit. Call the administration. Make it very clear what your demands are. So closing thoughts, Collin?
Just more bullshit. It's just more of the same bullshit. Like, they're killing him.
Yeah.
Slowly. And so they don't want to deal with it. And this is just I don't even know what to call this, but it's just, and I'm not a lawyer, but the idea of what they're doing is even that just seems way more confusing than it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, but I think, as you said, is a way to protect Biden. It's a way to, and by association, like the UK as well, to protect his election chances by not having something else that he has to deal with as part of the Constitution. So, and as I said, I feel like this is a way for him to kind of be like, I know that I'm not going to be president, so I'd rather have Trump deal with it. And, and just kick it along enough that either it will come to a point where Trump will deal with it, or the man dies within the next few months. So that's how vicious and like callous this administration is. And the sad thing is that no one is talking about this in the way that people should be, considering this is about free speech, which, as we know, Republicans are generally all about until it hits them personally, and then they kind of backtrack, pussy pop, whatever they want to do. That kind of shows that only for free speech when it comes to them, but then when it comes to regular people or people who actually do stuff that implicates our government, then they don't say shit.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so many things don't make sense with this, unless you understand that this is the punishment. This is his head on a spike for everyone to see. So to make sure you don't talk about the crimes of the United States. So that's bottom line to me. So, and it's why places that are doing that are demonetized and blocked and, hidden away from the world. So speaking of demonetization, we're demonetized. YouTube doesn't like us. So if you want to give us super chats or donations, you can go to ko-fi.com/Indie News Network or scan the QR code on your screen. If you're in the live chat, you can put !donate and it'll send you the link to that. So, but yeah, and if you can't support monetarily, we just ask you to like and subscribe. Hit the share button. Super easy way to help us out. Leave a comment. Let us know you're watching. Let us know what number you get, that kind of stuff. So, yeah.